Hi, my name is Tina Bolding, and I'm with the Cornerstone On Demand Foundation, serving in the role of Director for DisasterReady.org. October 13th is International Disaster Risk Reduction Day. And in honor of that day, I'm really pleased to be talking with Dave Whiddon from the Royal National Lifeboat Institute, also known as RNLI. And we're going to be talking about the issue of global drowning and the risks faced by humanitarian aid workers and really anyone that finds themselves working in a flooded environment. So Dave, thank you so much for talking with me today. I really appreciate your time.
Hi, Tina. Thank you for having me. It's great to be given this opportunity to talk about the work of the RNLI.
Wonderful. Well, to get started, why don't you share a little bit about who RNLI is and your role?
So the RNLI is a NGO, a non-government organisation based in the UK and Ireland, and we offer a maritime search and rescue response service around the UK and Ireland. As well as that, we've got a seasonal beach lifeguard service, and we also do a lot of drowning prevention work and share safety information. We also have a small international team, and we focus on trying to raise awareness of the drowning issue, as well as sharing our life-saving expertise. And we also work in a small number of countries where we know there is a high burden of drowning. And my role in particular is I've been with the RNLI over 20 years now, but with the international team since 2016. And I work as an international program manager, leading on capacity building projects, especially in maritime search and rescue. And one of my projects that I did when I first started with the international team was doing capacity building in Bangladesh with the Bangladesh Fire Service. And we were helping them set up their flood response and water rescue capacity.
So interesting. And I also know a tidbit about RNLI in that you all are celebrating your 200th anniversary this year. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. It's a very special occasion this year because, as you mentioned, it is the RNLI's 200-year anniversary, which is an incredible to think as an organization. It's been going for 200 years. So yeah, very privileged to be part of this historical year as well for me.
Goodness, that's amazing. So congratulations to everyone at RNLI.
Thank you.
All right. Well, let's jump into our topic. And since we are raising awareness about Disaster Risk Reduction Day, let's begin by talking a little bit about what that day is and why it's important.
So the International Day for Disaster Risk Reduction was started back in 1989. And it was started by the UN General Assembly. And it was a day to really sort of raise awareness of the issue of disasters and how to raise awareness of the risks faced by people that are caught up in disasters. And it's held every 13th of October. And it celebrates how people and communities around the world can do things to reduce their exposure to disasters. And again, as I said, it's about raising awareness of the risks that they can be facing during disasters. And the particular area that I work in is drowning prevention, which sometimes, unfortunately, in disasters where there's lots of flooding and tsunamis, cyclones, then obviously people can get caught up and end up drowning in these disasters. And according to the World Health Organization, around 236,000 people drown every year, which is quite a high figure, really.
Hi.
And what we know about that is that sadly 90% of those drownings are happening in low and middle income countries. But what's even more shocking about those numbers is that we know that 50% of those drownings are children. So
My goodness.
it's a very high figure, and these numbers are actually based on the data that is available. But we think that number could be a lot higher because sadly in a lot of disasters, sometimes people that might drown within a flood, it might not make it to any records. Likewise, if there's a local ferry in a low resource setting is there might be hundreds of people on that ferry, and if it sinks, there might be a huge loss of life. And again, those numbers might not be recorded in any records. And sadly, that is a regular occurrence in some countries where lots of people drown just going about their daily lives.
Oh my goodness. Well, what I'm really interested in, what motivated you to become or to be involved in drowning prevention and flood rescue operations? And I would love to hear also the one story that kind of stands out in your mind that you won't ever forget as you've done that kind of work.
I mean, that's a really good question, but I guess the first part of your question, I was very lucky to grow up in Spain by the sea. So I was always around, in and around the water. I loved swimming in the sea, and then I got involved in a number of water sports. And then at the age of 18, I joined the Royal Marines. And obviously the Royal Marines are part of the Navy, and we do a lot of amphibious operations. So I got to travel all around the world, jumping in and out of boats and going across oceans on ships. So I always had an affinity to the water. And as I say, I took a number of water sports, including diving and kayaking. So I was a keen sea kayaker. And then after I left the military, I spent a number of years working in the outdoor industry. So I used to lead expeditions down in South America, and we used to do a lot of whitewater rafting. As well as that, we used to do trips out to Lake Titicaca and the border between Peru and Bolivia. Beautiful. And one of my jobs there was to make sure that the boats that we were using to go out to visit the local communities on the islands had some safety provisions in place. So making sure that they had the right equipment on board, life jackets, and they were well serviced and maintained, and we weren't overloading the boats. So that's how I sort of my background in terms of the water. And then when I got back from traveling, I ended up back in Poole in Dorset on the south coast of the UK, just as the RNLI were building their college. So I got involved as a trainer, delivering training to all our volunteer crews, both in maritime search and rescue and sea survival. And in the second part to your question is any stories of some of the impacts that I mean, for me, the motivation to do the work I do is really being able to see the impact that our work has. And to put that into context, we do a lot of training to other like-minded organizations around the world. And I guess the one that stands out with me is the work I did in Bangladesh with the fire service, because the impact that had in terms of their capability to then go on and rescue lots and lots of people was fascinating. And I remember a week after I got back from Bangladesh of delivering a training to the fire service, I got a message from one of the course participants, and they were actually using their newfound knowledge to be proactive, and they were actually patrolling the ferry terminals during the busy season where lots of people moving around for festivals. And sadly, one of the ladies had fallen off the ferry, but they were on hand there with their newfound training and equipment, and they were able to act really quickly to save the lady's life. And when they sent me the message explaining to me that training had allowed them to respond, that was what really gives me that motivation to go out and be able to share that knowledge and expertise.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I believe Bangladesh is one of the areas in the world that has quite a lot of flooding each year.
Yes, it is. It's a very, very
I'm sure that was super
floods.
helpful. Yeah. Well, when we think about our audience for Disaster Ready being humanitarian aid workers and international development workers, why is this topic of drowning prevention important for them?
I mean, I think it's really important for anybody who, by the nature of their work, end up working around water, is that they have an awareness of the issues. But we all know with climate change, there is an increase in extreme weather around the world, creating climate disasters, especially in places that are not normally used to them. I mean, you only have to see the news today. Central Europe has been heavily hit by floods. There's been sadly 24 lives lost around Central Europe. And then I just checked the news half an hour ago, and there's reports of floods happening in Italy as we speak. and also lives being lost. So I think it's really, really important that as these disasters are happening more and more often, and especially in places where might not be used to dealing with them, and especially as you said, more and more aid workers and affected communities might be exposed to these type of environments. Right. I think it's really important that communities have the tools and the knowledge to be able to keep themselves safe. Also, by the nature of aid workers, they might be finding themselves using local transport on the water, using local boats. And again, it's important that people take some safety precautions. And again, what you find that with a lot of the drowning statistics is that most people that drown never intended entering the water. So it's really important that you think about the safety aspects of being in and around the water.
And so that makes sense that most don't hadn't intended to be in the water. With the statistics being so high on global deaths, is part of that people simply don't know how to swim, or is it also a larger issue that drives those numbers to be higher?
I mean, there's a number of issues, and a lot of it is around not fully understanding the hazards associated, especially with a flood. And I mean, a lot of people underestimate the power of the water in a flood, and it doesn't take much water to sort of knock you off your feet. So if you're trying to cross a river that suddenly has increased the flow to get out of the flood and you get knocked off your feet, you then suddenly find yourself in a situation where the water's overtaken and you're being dragged down the river. So that can be an issue. Also, a lot of times people don't appreciate that when they're driving as well. A lot of people get caught out by driving. And it's interesting here in the UK, every time there is a flood, every time you see the news, there's people sat on the top of their cars stuck in the middle of a flood. So again, I think it's really important that people never underestimate the dangers and take that advice to not drive through floods or try and walk through flooded waters unless it's absolutely necessary to get yourself out of danger. I wouldn't recommend getting in the water.
Right. Well, I wish I could say I didn't know that from personal experience, but I certainly found myself unexpectedly in floodwaters in my car, not because I intentionally drove through it, but because it was dark at night and I didn't see that there was water that had covered the road, and I slammed into it going about 50 miles an hour. And thankfully, the force carried me to the other side of the flooded water, but I was just on this small patch of dry land. And yeah, it was quite scary. And someone had to pick me up to be able to get there. I had to leave the car. So, you know, it's interesting, even in my own country, the United States, we see the same thing. You tell people turn around, don't drown, don't drive into it, and yet people intentionally do, and sometimes unintentionally do. So that's why I'm passionate, you know, about this topic, because we really need to be prepared. So coming back to humanitarian workers, can you share a story that illustrates the drowning risk for them?
So again, I think a lot of the issues is not being aware of the hazards. And sometimes if they are going into a community that has been affected by flood, I think it's really important that they've had some type of training or awareness of the hazards and don't take unnecessary risks. And also, I hear lots and lots of stories of humanitarians that have suddenly got on a local boat to go to the communities that they're visiting, and the boat's either been overloaded and capsized, and they've ended up in the water having to rescue themselves, and they've had lucky escapes. So we often get requests for, is there any safety information that you can provide in order to keep our people safe? And I think there's definitely a trend for people to be a lot more aware of some of these risks now, whereas maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, people might not have been so aware. So I think the work that that the global community is doing in terms of raising awareness around drowning and drowning prevention. I think we're slowly seeing a lot more people taking action. So yeah,
Okay.
as I say, I think in terms of my point, I think you can really see a change, but not everybody is doing that change. I think there's still a lot of work to be done to raise more awareness of the issue and make people actually take action to keep themselves safe. And it can be really simple solutions as well. This doesn't need to be super expensive and low cost. Some of the solutions are really, really low cost and really simple advice.
Well, share some of those tips. What are some tips of things that people can do that find themselves in floodwaters or needing to be transported by boat, even being rescued? From your house, you're going to end up more than likely in a boat, and that could be new to somebody. And hopefully the rescue operation team is doing the right thing. But there's a lot of individuals that have a desire to hop in their boat and say, well, I'm going to go help my neighbor, and that can be a good thing, but you still want those individuals to understand what they're doing so that the rescue operation doesn't put any people in more jeopardy. So what are some tips?
So I think the first tip I would give everybody is listen to the weather forecasts, and if there is warnings and you're being told to evacuate, then take early action. From my experience of responding to floods is that most people have had the warnings and been told to evacuate, but they don't want to evacuate because obviously they want to leave their house, which I fully understand. But if they don't evacuate and then their house gets flooded, then we have to go and rescue them. So the first advice I would give everybody is make sure you are monitoring the weather. And if you do get the warning to evacuate, then do evacuate early. That's the first point I would then. And if you do get caught out then, and if you do end up falling in the water, the RNLI has recently launched, well, in the last couple of years, got a campaign called Float to Live, which effectively is that if you should unexpectedly end up in the water, is to fight your instincts and try and stop panicking and swimming initially, especially if it's cold water, because you can be exposed to what's called cold shock. So the advice is to sort of stay calm and float on your back like a star, and then submerge your ears slightly, and then use your arms just to keep yourself afloat, and then let that cold shock pass. And then if you can is call for help or try and swim to close to shore if you're close to land. So that's if it's flat water. But obviously if the water's swift water and it's moving really fast, then you can adopt a couple of options, which called defensive or aggressive swimming. And again, these can be learned if you watch videos, or you can take some training for that. But as I say, I would not advocate anybody entering the water at all unless it's absolutely necessary to get out of the situation you're in. So yeah, I guess in answer to the three key points is check the weather, keep eye on the weather, and if you're told to evacuate early, and then if you do end up in the water, float to live and try and get yourself out of that situation.
And those principles you just described are actually part of the flood and water safety video that RNLI and DisasterReady created. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. But there's illustrations in that video that actually show you the float to live techniques that you just described. I really like that video. It's just 7 minutes. People can access it on YouTube. Just type in flood safety and flood and water safety, and it's by RNLI and DisasterReady. And I sent it to all my family. It said,
well, it's incredible.
You need to watch this.
Yeah, because we've already had some cases of where people have survived because they followed that advice. So it's incredible to see how that messaging is getting out there. And we've had a couple of recent cases where people have ended up in the water, taken on the advice, and have been rescued. So it's great that people are listening to the messaging.
Yeah, and that video is provided in English, French, and Spanish, and Arabic is coming soon. And all of that is on YouTube. Well, what other education? I mean, we know that education is key for any risk reduction initiative. So what other types of training resources does RNLI have?
So we've got a website for the RNLI main website, rnli.org.uk, which has got a number of water safety education messages there. We've got lots of resources for children. So if you go into schools and want to raise awareness in schools, so there's lots of education materials there. And also it's been great to be able to work with DisasterReady to actually produce the flood safety course that's now online. And as you mentioned, it's there ready and it can be accessed there, and it gives you some great information on how to operate safely in a flood. It gives you an awareness of some of the hazards. It's give you an awareness of some of the equipment you might want to use, as well as awareness of hydrology, because in a flood environment, you need to be able to understand what the water is doing and what are some of the hazards with being around that water. So it's great that we've been able to work together to produce that. So no, it's been a really good working together to get that out there.
Yeah, and so that there's a video, and then there's a self-paced online course, and that's the one that you were just talking about. The course is called Flood Safety. And for those that are interested in accessing that course, you can go to disasterready.org, sign up for a free account. The course is free. It's 15 minutes. And what I love about that one is that it was designed for both a mobile phone, so it's easy to take on a mobile phone and a computer, and then it comes with a downloadable guide with all of the content that's in the course. And it teaches you, self-rescue, rescuing others, the type of equipment you need, how to communicate, lots of great information in that course. All right, very good. Well, Dave, it was a pleasure talking with you. Was there anything else that you wanted to share before we close?
No, I just want to say a big thank you to DisasterReady for allowing us to work together and raising awareness of the drowning issue, and hopefully more and more people can become aware of the issue, and as well as the incorporating drowning prevention into disaster risk reduction programs. I think there's a really good opportunity to sort of look at how we can incorporate drowning prevention into disasters risk reduction programs. And I think there's lots of opportunities there to explore further how that could work. So no, thank you for the opportunity to be able to come and chat to you.
Yeah, no, it's RNLI has been an amazing partner, and I would encourage, we have many individuals that will watch this, but for people that are working for organizations, whether they're humanitarian aid, development, really any type of organization, that if you want to strengthen your capacity for flood response so that your staff are safe and know what to do, I would encourage you to check out the flood safety course on DisasterReady, but also the flood and water safety video on YouTube. You'll see the link here on the screen, and then you can also find it in the description. That's out on YouTube and very easy to share. But please also go to the RNLI website. They have quite a few additional resources that would be really helpful to strengthen capacity and make sure that your staff and volunteers, anybody working in the organization is kept safe and knows what to do. So thank you so very much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tina.
Okay, bye.
Take care. Bye.